Hello to everybody, and welcome back to our Bible study. It's been a little while, a little bit of a break. I had the opportunity to return to the States and do some things I needed to do there and prep for some stuff that's coming up. So that was a good trip, and I'm thankful that I was able to go and make it back safely. And now it's time to start the book of Ecclesiastes, which I know many of you have been anticipating. We just finished up Job, and I think that this book is actually a good follow-up to Job in its theme and in its contents. So what I wanted to do today is, we're not going to get into the first chapter today. What I wanted to do is to go over some introduction information in a separate video so that our first video isn't like 20 minutes long like our chapter 1 of Job was. So maybe we can shorten that and just do kind of an introduction to the overall theme of this book today. And then, Lord willing, tomorrow we'll get into chapter 1. I don't know why I messed that up. The book of Ecclesiastes is unique in a lot of ways in the biblical collection. Some people have called it kind of a hopeless book, kind of a depressing book. And if you read the first, 10 chapters or so, you'll see why. And we'll see that as we go through the book. But why does it have that hopeless nature? And part of that is because Solomon, who's almost certainly the author of it, is writing about his experiences as he's trying to find or to discern whether or not there's really any deeper meaning to life, any purpose for living, if he's living in a world, as he calls, under the sun, meaning a purely physical world, a world without an eternity and salvation in the future, a world without God. If you live in a world without God, is there really anything worth living for and investing your time and energy into, or is it all just going to end in the grave? And Solomon's conclusion through the book is pretty much, yeah, it is all going to end in the grave. And that's why it's somewhat, of a hopeless first 10 chapters or so. It's all going to end in the grave. And Solomon goes through all these things that he has observed in his great wisdom, things that ultimately don't satisfy, don't bring lasting, don't give someone a purpose to their life, and that they're all vanity. They're all emptiness. Or he says, striving after wind. It's like chasing the wind and trying to catch it. You can pursue these things all your life. You'll never actually catch it and find that satisfaction, that purpose, that meaning that you're looking for. So in the beginning of the book, Solomon talks about some of the things that men often look to try to find satisfaction. Things like pleasure, ease or rest, riches, wine. And if you know the story of Solomon, he was extremely rich. He had tons of wives and concubines. He had made a name for himself, and he had accumulated, thanks to God's gift to him, an incredible amount of wisdom. So, he's like the perfect case study here. If anyone's going to find satisfaction in one of these things, it's going to be Solomon. And what he concludes is pleasure, it's fleeting, it's not going to last forever. Wine is going to make you into a fool. You can have great riches, but what does that mean in the end? You're going to have to give them away to somebody else when you die. And you can make a name for yourself, but as the generations go on, nobody's going to remember you. And so what if they do? It doesn't really bring you any benefit if you're just extinct, basically, in the dirt, in the dust, in the grave. He talks about how the grave is kind of the equalizer for all men. You can be rich, poor, great, foolish, wise, doesn't matter. In the end, everybody is headed to death, and nobody escapes that. And so he's asking, what does it even matter if you're a fool or you're a wise man on earth? Does it matter at all? If the grave is the destiny of all men, who cares? And what's more is that some people live in wisdom. Some people live wisely. Some people live uprightly, and yet bad things still happen to them. It's very reminiscent of Job, which is why I mentioned that in the beginning. So you can live wise and bad things can still happen to you. Sometimes you can live like a fool, and you live many years and your life is really not all that bad. So, what's the point of choosing wisdom over foolishness if you don't even know what lot in life you're going to get? And again, he repeats the conclusion that he states right at the beginning of the book in chapter 1, verse 2. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity. Without God, without hope of something after death, without trust that there's someone who's going to make all these things right in the end, life really is vanity. It's chasing after wind. So the author of Ecclesiastes, he doesn't just leave us in this hopelessness. He's going to give us a little bit more hope. He's going to make some statements that point us to hope in God. And he's also going to tell us not just how not to live and how not to find meaning, but also some ways to live on this earth that are the best ways to live. The first thing he talks about is that, well, first of all, he believes in God. He's not an atheist. He doesn't believe that it's just us under this sun floating out here in space and that's all that there is. He believes that God created and controls the world. So he says God has given us some small blessings in this world, in small moments that we can enjoy and we can appreciate, and that gives some enjoyment to life. Don't seek ultimate satisfaction in life, but God has given us small blessings. Those are worth enjoying. And then towards especially the end of the book, the author begins to talk about, well, how should we live in light of the vanity of a purely physical world? He says, don't live for this purely physical world, but rather look to its creator. He says the best way to live is to serve God and to keep his commandments, and that this is the duty of men when they're on earth. And he gives more hope that in the end, God's going to make everything right. He says that God is going to bring all men's works into judgment, whether they're good or whether they're evil. Now, this theme of judgment is going to be something that's familiar to most Christians in the modern day because it's talked about in the New Testament. We don't exactly know how much Solomon knew about the resurrection and eternal life and living with God forever after our physical bodies die here on this earth. We've talked about before how the authors of the Old Testament may not have had a complete view of the resurrection and life after death. But that's totally okay for us in the modern day. Reading this book that was written long ago, we can still learn the lesson that Solomon is trying to teach us here, and then we can apply also what we know now that has been revealed through Jesus and through his apostles about life after death. So what do we need to take away from Solomon? We need to take away that, hey, don't live for this world under the sun, this physical world. If you live as if this is all there is, you're never going to find satisfaction, you're never going to find lasting joy, you're never going to find meaning in life. And that's the naturalist's dilemma, isn't it? That's why a lot of people reject the idea of a totally natural world, because it's a meaningless world. And that's exactly what Solomon, the wisest man on earth, concluded as well. All our pursuits, all of our striving after the wind ends in the grave, and that's all there is if this is a natural world. But it's not, right? And so now we know that when our bodies go into the grave, when we return to the dust, there's actually hope there, that we ought to serve God and to keep his commandments in this life, because we have hope in the grave. And what is that hope? It's that we're going to be resurrected. We're going to be resurrected through Jesus, who himself was the first fruits of the resurrection. And then we're going to get to live with God for eternity in heaven. And it's there in the presence of God where we're really going to find satisfaction. We're really going to find contentment in all that our heart has ever desired, being in the presence of the creator of the universe. So what are we supposed to do with this book? We're supposed to look at it. We're supposed to see Solomon, the perfect case study, and we're supposed to say and conclude, look, Solomon experienced more pleasure in his life of all kinds than I'm ever going to experience. His name was greater than my name's ever going to be. He had more wine than I'm ever going to have. He achieved more than I'm ever going to achieve. He's richer than I'm ever going to be. Maybe I should learn from his wisdom and not waste my life in pursuit of these things thinking they're going to make me happy, but rather I should take and learn his wisdom and say, the best thing I can do on this earth is to serve God and to keep his commandments and to look for my lasting satisfaction in heaven rather than here under the sun. I wouldn't want to waste my whole life chasing after the wind, chasing something I'm never going to accomplish. It's better to invest in eternity and have that hope of being with God one day. So I think that's the largest takeaway from Ecclesiastes. They're all kind of little lessons that we can learn throughout the book. You can definitely see Solomon's Proverbs. Some of them are just kind of like inserted into the book. You can definitely hear Solomon if you've done our Proverbs study. You can hear his Proverbs coming out in this book, and very similar to what we've read in that previous study. And so This one I think is going to be really, really good, really enjoyable. If we can get through the hopelessness and understand the larger message, it's a very enjoyable book to study. And it's just a good reminder to all of us. And I think we need this almost on a daily basis. Don't live for this world. It's not going to bring you the happiness that you think it is. Only God, your creator, can do that. So Lord willing, tomorrow we will get into chapter 1, and I'm happy I did this introduction beforehand because otherwise that would have been a really long video. If you're unfamiliar with our studies that we do 5-minute studies through each chapter of the Bible. We create PDF handouts that break down the book, give you all the key information. You can download those for free on our website at tobelikechrist.com. There'll be a link in the description. And I think that's all I have to say. So join us tomorrow for Ecclesiastes 1. There's 12 chapters in the book, so it only takes us about 2 weeks to get through the whole thing. And then we are on to one of other Solomon's writings, the Psalm of Psalms, or the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon. But that's for later. Let's talk about Ecclesiastes first.